What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Chris Fedor. And of course, you know him, you love him, but it's time for another rendition of Hey, Chris. So we got the man on the podcast to go through our questions coming directly from our subscribers to Subtext, the only platform where you can have your voice heard, the only platform where you can ask questions on a daily basis directly to our phones and have 24/7 communication with me and Chris. Don't get too crazy now, but we like to have fun with our subscribers. So the first question, which comes from Matt in Nashville, is what position are the Cavs looking to fill with their 14th spot? Do they really think that Tomlin will get some minutes this year, and will Wade be on the team? So obviously Matt came in with a boatload of questions, but I think we have to start with the first one first and foremost. Chris, what do you think is the highest priority when it comes to the type of player, the position that the Cavs are trying to fill with the 14th roster spot on this team?
I don't think there is a priority position. From everything that I've been told, the Cavs are very open-minded to different possibilities. Maybe a two-way wing because Kenny Atkinson likes to run a switchable defense with lineup versatility and stuff like that, and you can never have enough wings. I wouldn't discount that. Ball handler, I wouldn't discount that either. How ready is Craig Porter Jr. for this increased opportunity at the beginning of the year? When Darius Garland's going to miss some time during the regular season, how much of that responsibility do you want to put on Donovan Mitchell? How much of that responsibility do you want to put on Lonzo Ball? Lonzo Ball, somebody who you're probably going to have to do some injury management with throughout the course of the regular season. And how ready is Craig Porter Jr. for that expanded opportunity? There are some ball handlers still available in terms of free agency, but I think when you're at this point in free agency, Ethan, where it's a really shallow pool of players available, you're just trying to ask yourself, is there somebody that can bring value to this organization? And value can be defined a different kind of way, right? You know, at the end of last offseason, the Cavs brought in Tristan Thompson. He brought value for a different reason. It wasn't on-court value. It was behind-the-scenes value. So maybe there's somebody like that out there that has a relationship with Kenny Atkinson or has a relationship with this organization in some capacity, and you see value in that kind of way. It's the last roster spot, essentially, for this team. The odds of him playing big minutes, especially this late into free agency, very, very small. But you want to have depth. You want to protect yourself. You want insurance. And you just want to find somebody who's going to bring value to the organization in some capacity.
So the second question coming from Matt in Nashville, which I know you got into briefly into your different articles throughout the last couple of weeks. Dean Wade has been a hot commodity when it comes to conversations in Las Vegas, when it comes to how he's been perceived by other organizations, and obviously how he is known and loved by the Cleveland Cavaliers, someone who was brought up through their system, but is coming up on the end of his contract. And Chris, I've said this already, but I want to get your take on it. I think it would be a mistake for the Cavs to go away from Dean Wade unless they're going to get somebody back in return that is not only a big man, but is someone that can also do what Dean Wade does, which is guard 4 through 5 and be able to switch on the perimeter with bigger guards as well. I don't think the Cavs have somebody like that outside of maybe DeAndre Hunter, and I still don't think that he's doing it to the caliber of Dean Wade. What do you think about the rumblings of Dean Wade around the league, and do you think he has a fit on this Cavs team coming into the 2025-2026 season?
Well, the rumblings have been there throughout the course of the offseason, Ethan. We've talked about this a number of different times on this podcast. I've written about it. The Cavs shopping Isaac Okoro, shopping Dean Wade, seeing what kind of value is out there, seeing what kind of interest is out there in one of those two guys or both of those guys. And look, I'm with you. I think the Cavs I think they value Dean's size. I think they value his versatility. But we've also talked a number of different times about in the situation, the financial situation that the Cavs are in, with how deep into the luxury tax they are, with how above the second apron they are. They're going to have to start making some of these bigger picture, long term decisions. And I think in the situation that they're in, the truth is the chances of Dean Wade re-signing with this team next off season, they're very minimal at this point. DeAndre Hunter came in last year, midway through the season. He plays the same kind of positions that Dean does. It's somebody who could be an impediment to Dean Wade getting playing time. If you remember, before the Cavs traded for DeAndre, we were talking about how valuable Dean was because they needed they needed a player like that, with that size, with that length, with that versatility, with those defensive capabilities. But DeAndre does a lot of those kinds of things from a role perspective. And he's a better, more reliable, more consistent offensive player. He's a better, more reliable, more consistent 3-point shooter. So I think that's what you're having happen here. The Cavs are just exploring the interest of Dean and seeing, all right, is there a deal very similar to the one that the Cavs made with the Bulls for Lonzo Ball? You bring in another player who can do a little bit more, who could be a little bit more consistent, who can be a little bit more reliable, and maybe has a contract that, given the Cavs' financial situation, is more appealing. Or maybe there's more team control attached to that contract that the Cavs get back in return. So it's not just losing a player, a valuable player, because he's had interest from a lot of different contenders across the NBA. The Houston Rockets have asked about Dean Wade. They've expressed interest in him. I'm told the Phoenix Suns at one point expressed interest in Dean. The Dallas Mavericks make sense from a fit perspective. Basically, when you're talking about many of the top 5 teams in each conference, those are the teams that have at least said, hey, what's it going to cost for somebody like Dean? What would we have to give up for somebody like Dean? And again, this comes down to the same kind of situation that the Cavs were in with Jared Allen, with Darius Garland, with Isaac Okoro. There's got to be a deal out there that would have to make sense from the Cavs' perspective for them to be willing to say yes to that deal, or for them to be willing to move what they think is a valuable piece of a team that has championship aspirations. This isn't just, we don't like Dean Wade, we don't value him at all, just take him off our hands. We're in a financial crunch, we're a cap-strapped organization, just take him. No, I think it's, okay, what other things could we potentially get back? And are those things more valuable? Do those things fit better? Do those things fit our financial situation a little bit better? I did have a source that I talked to yesterday. This was just one source that I talked to yesterday. I've talked to a bunch of different people about this throughout the course of this offseason, and that's part of the reason why we've been talking about it on this podcast and why I've been writing about it, because it just doesn't go away. And when I was in Vegas, I didn't expect to hear it as much as I did, but, I heard it a lot while I was out there. So I checked in with one source yesterday, and they classified the Cavs' potential of trading Dean as 50-50 at this point, a complete and utter toss-up. And it's just based on, like I said, the kinds of offers that the Cavs could get for him and whether they deem those as worthy to say yes to. But there is definitely interest in Dean, and I think there are teams around the NBA that value all the same things that the Cavs value with it. I mean, we're talking about, statistically, a 90-plus percentile on the defensive end of the floor. A guy who can guard 3 through 5, depending on certain matchups and certain lineup constructions. We're talking about somebody who, at times can be a floor spacer and a catch and shoot threat from 3-point range. The style of player that he is, There's value to that. No doubt about it. But just like those other teams that are interested in showing interest in Dean, value Dean, the Cavs do too. And I'm with you, Ethan. I think, based on the makeup of this roster, it's hard for me to say that and I don't see the offers that are coming in. That's for Kobe Altman and Mike Gansey and Brandon Weems and the entire front office to kind of evaluate. But I tend to think at this point, there's more value to having Dean on the roster than there is to not having him, at least for one more season. And then if you lose him, you lose him. That's the way it goes. You can't keep everybody. They learned that this offseason when it came to Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. Dean Wade, for them, he's become more replaceable because of some of the other movements that they've made. And because Larry Nance Jr. can play some power forward position, because Naquan Tomlin is valued and liked inside this organization, and because, like I said, DeAndre Hunter, the Cavs are going to fully explore the DeAndre Hunter experience in a way that they weren't able to in the second half of last season. So all of those variables, I think, they make Dean more expendable than what he once was. But I still think there's value that he brings to this organization that the Cavs should be a little bit hesitant to just move off of him, because he provides depth, he provides insurance, he provides versatility. And it's a good thing to have based on how their lineup is going to be constructed throughout the course of this year.
I think that's all good points, and I think that's well said. And we talked about this on a different podcast slightly, and I just wanted to reiterate it. The Cavs 5-man depth chart is slick, right? And I've been a huge advocate for the Cavs to get a true big man, right? And whether or not that happens is still to be seen. But the Cavs depth chart at center is Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, Larry Nance, who hates playing the 5, and D Wade. So, and Naquan Tomlin, if you want to throw him in there, but he's on a 2-way, right? So how reliable is he going to be in rotation minutes and that kind of thing? So I think you need Dean to be able to play the 5. Do I love Dean Wade at the 5? No. Did he play the 5 last season and Kenny Atkinson was happy and fine with throwing him out there? Yes. So I don't think you can discredit that at all, and you have to take all of those things into account. The one player that the Cavs had on the roster as a backup center, you mentioned him, Chris, Tristan Thompson. And we have another subtexter, Bruce from Columbus, asking, hey, Chris, is Tristan back with the team this coming season? And I'm curious to what you think, because we had this conversation way earlier into the summer. And Chris, I think we might have overdone ourselves earlier into the summer, having so many different conversations that delved into things that people might have missed earlier on. But Tristan Thompson, his availability, being a free agent, what he means to this organization, what he means to this current roster. Darius Garland, especially. Do you think the Cavs bring him back, or was the Larry Nance acquisition kind of a shift of power in the veteran leadership in the Cavs locker room?
Well, I think there's still an opening for somebody like Tristan as a veteran leader behind the scenes, as an extension of the coaching staff, as somebody who's willing to come here, accept a lesser role, and not ruffle feathers, and just, be a good teammate behind the scenes, and at the same time, be a good depth piece. And again, we're late into July, we're almost into August, and the kind of player that the Cavs could get on the veterans minimum at this point of free agency, I don't know from an on-court value how many more are going to provide what Tristan Thompson theoretically could, and there are 0 of them that would provide more behind the scenes. His relationship with Darius Garland, his relationship with the organization, his relationship with Kenny Atkinson and the other coaches on the staff, his ability to speak up and hold guys accountable when it needs to happen. Not even Larry Nance Jr. has that level of equity to do that. So if that's what the Cavs want from this particular roster spot, then Tristan still makes a lot of sense. I think the question is, Thomas Bryant, for example, is still a free agent center. If you had to give him more minutes, would you be more comfortable doing that? The answer is yes. Of course you would. From an on-court perspective, yes, definitely. But that's just one example. Beyond that, I mean, this was a bad center class to begin with. When you're having to convince yourself that Mason Plumlee made sense, that DeAndre Jordan made sense as a backup center. I just think the odds of adding somebody at this point that's going to give you significant on-court value or make you comfortable with what they bring on court if you have to go to them in an emergency situation. I mean, you're just really convincing yourself. You're just really pushing it. So I wouldn't rule out Tristan, but I would also say that the Cavs don't value backup center to a high capacity, and they've shown that with their actions over the last couple of years because they believe that Evan Mobley is technically their backup center, and because they believe in Larry Nance Jr. They believe in his versatility, his switchability. So them using effectively both free agent spots that were available to them on the same general position with this roster makeup, I don't know. It's hard for me to believe, knowing how little they value the backup center to begin with. And I would probably, in this situation, say that they're more likely to target a different position or a different skill set. But I don't rule it out because there is a consistent theme, whether it was JB Bickerstaff, Kenny Atkinson, or that last guy on the roster. They understand the limitations of it. They understand how little that guy is going to play. So Tristan still brings value a different kind of way. And there is a bunch of coaches around the NBA. Like I said, JB Bickerstaff did this. Kenny Atkinson did this. There is a belief that having the right person who's not going to complain about playing time, who's going to fall in line with a specific role, that is maybe the best way to use your last roster spot, especially in the situation that the Cavs are in. Now, if you're a different kind of team, you're a young, up-and-coming team, maybe you just take a shot on player development. Take a shot on a young guy, and you put him into your system, and you say, maybe possibly down the road. But the Cavs are competing for a championship, and there's value to Tristan. So I'm not ruling that out. I'm not ruling that out just because they went and signed Larry Nance Jr. But I think the way that this ends is them probably going a different direction and a different kind of skill set with that last open roster spot.
Chris, you know who doesn't complain about getting minutes? Somebody who hasn't played in the NBA since 2023. And we've had this conversation a little bit on this podcast, but Victor Oladipo is a player that the Cavs were at his workout a couple of weeks ago, and we know how much Dan Gilbert loved Victor Oladipo when he was coming into the NBA. Of course, we also know the injury history of Victor Oladipo to this point in his NBA career. A once highly sought-after player has not played an NBA minute since 2023, where he played in 42 games for the Miami Heat. And I'm not here to poke fun at anybody's NBA career. I could never have made it to the NBA. But there are so many fans that were poking fun at the Lonzo Ball acquisition because of his injury history. And there are now people saying that they would have loved or would love to have Victor Oladipo on the team. And while I can see the promise in the situation, it does not make sense to me because of what other people are already saying about the given situation that they have now, right? Lonzo Ball played in 35 games last year. The last time he played before that was 2022. But we've had this conversation where this is his first offseason healthy in years. Victor Oladipo, kind of in the same boat. Chris, what do you think about what the Cavs could do if they went and got Victor Oladipo and how he would fit into the system and what you're hearing behind the scenes of the validity of acquiring somebody like Oladipo?
Well, there's just more upside, Ethan. There's more upside to Victor Oladipo. Just because he has been basically an all-star caliber player. He's been a high-level playoff performer in the past. And you sit here and you say, well, that was a long time ago. And you're right. And you sit there and you say that was a lot of injuries ago. And you're right. But there's more upside to Victor Oladipo than Johnny Juzang. More people know who Victor Oladipo is than Stanley Umade and Jared Rhoden, than Trevelyan Queen. Like, those are the kinds of names that were Bryce McGowan's. Those are the kinds of names that we're talking about here. So, if you want to look at what is effectively the last roster spot on this team and like who could potentially get real NBA minutes if something goes wrong, if there's foul trouble, if the guy continues to work his way up the depth chart, who has a better chance of working their way up the depth chart? Adam Flagler or Victor Oladipo? Johnny Davis or Victor Oladipo? Josh Christopher or Victor Oladipo? Brandon Boston Jr. or Victor? So that's the kind of situation that we're in. I don't think there's any NBA team out there that's saying, oh my God, the 33-year-old Victor Oladipo that we're going to get is going to go into our starting lineup. He's going to go into the top 10 of our rotation. But if he continues to show that he's healthy and he continues to show that he's something of the player that he once was, there's more upside to him. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. And you just move on because it's the last guy on your roster. So I think there is a team out there potentially that is willing to take a chance on him and just see, okay, what's still in there in an NBA game situation? What's still in there? Anything still in there? From everything that I heard from people that I talked to, the Cavs were present at his workout, and they were, I would say that the feedback that I got is that Victor looked good. But I mean, that's a private workout against nobody in a gym in Las Vegas. So what does that really mean? That's what teams are trying to figure out. What does that really mean? Okay, he looked good. What does that mean? Does that mean he could still play? Does it mean we bring him to training camp for a tryout? Is he interested? I think a lot of teams are still trying to figure it out, but it's worth a look, at least in a workout environment, because of the other options that you're considering in free agency and the appeal of those guys. So I do think he's somebody that the Cavs are at the very least considering with an open roster spot. There are other guys around the NBA that I think the Cavs are at least considering with an open roster spot as well. But I don't think we have to make too much of a deal about it. I do think the Dan Gilbert situation is pretty interesting. I mean, if you go back to when Victor Oladipo came into the NBA, Dan wanted him. Dan was going to take him. But I think around that time, there was conversation around Dan Gilbert about, hey, back off a little bit, buddy. You're probably a little bit too hands-on as an owner. Let your basketball people make the basketball decisions. And from everything that I've been able to gather, David Griffin was the one. And he wasn't the general manager at the time, Chris Grant was. But David Griffin was the one who spent a lot of time around Anthony Bennett. David Griffin was the one who spent a lot of time on the West Coast watching Anthony Bennett and talking to people around the UNLV program. And he really sold Anthony Bennett as the number one overall pick. Didn't work at all. Might have been one of the worst number one overall picks of the last 2 decades because of the return on investment that the Cavs did not get for that. So that was a mistake. But yes, at the time, Dan was very high on that version of Victor Oladipo. And you know what? A lot of other teams around the NBA were very high on that version of Victor Oladipo. The guy that the Cavs would sign or somebody else in the NBA would sign is not that version of Victor Oladipo. So definitely keep it in perspective. But I think because of his name recognition and because of the pool of candidates in free agency, he's going to stand out because you know him and you know his resume more than some of these other guys that I just rattled off that people probably thought was like a joke at the ESPYs, the way that my man Shane Gillis did with the WNBA player.
That was insane, by the way. And we're not going to go in depth on that. But oh my goodness. Shane Gillis and the crickets in the room from the stunned audience. Insane.
The awkward silence.
Oh my God. But to Victor Oladipo, who literally took to social media pleading his case on why he felt he could make an impact on an NBA roster on July 13th, 2025, so just a week ago maybe, he said, and I quote, "I feel so great right now, better than I felt in the last 7 years, mind, body, and soul. I know I am a fighter. I know I am a warrior. I have seen every lens this game and this league has to offer. I know I can help any team in any role win in any way. I also know the people want to see me succeed in this game and play at the highest level again. My injuries are behind me, and it will never happen again. I am at peace with that and my past. I am ready to build a present now and future of a lifetime." A lot of promises in a tweet from a guy just trying to make his way back into the NBA and saying injuries will never happen again for a guy who has a myriad of injuries is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I do think he's right. Victor Oladipo is one of those players where you want to see him on the floor. You want to see him on the court. You want to see him succeed. You want to see him have this comeback story to showcase that it is possible to return from injuries, right? And obviously, a story kind of similar to that is his former teammate, former Indiana Pacer, Paul George. And now he's actually going through another surgery before the 2025-2026 season, showcasing how he's going to come back through all of these different trials and tribulations. And again, I'm not saying that Victor Oladipo in past wouldn't have been on the top of my billboard list of someone that you would want. I think I'm just in the same seat that I've been with you and Jimmy for the entire summer is I gotta see it before I can believe anything is going to come and bear the fruits of his labor, right? Because Victor Oladipo now is 33 years old. So he's not that old, but he's been out of the league, been out of practice, all of these things. I just think you gotta take everything with a little bit of perspective. And if the Cavs end up making this move, it would not surprise me because Dan Gilbert has had his finger on the pulse and might want some retribution from the Anthony Bennett draft. But I just think this is a situation where you have to be careful, especially when you're constructing a roster. And if you were to go give Victor Oladipo 3, 4, maybe even 5 players on this roster have had extensive injury histories. And what that means in a playoff series, what that means through a grueling 82-game season might be a little bit taxing for everybody involved, even if you're splitting up their minutes more so than they've ever had in their entire NBA careers.
The other thing that you have to ask, and I don't know exactly what Victor Oladipo is looking for. Is he looking for just a shot on an NBA roster? Just give me a shot on an NBA roster? Or does he want to play? There is no real opportunity for last guy on the roster on this team with this depth, with this talent. There's no real opportunity for that guy to play. If that guy plays, there have been a bunch of injuries. There's been a bunch of load management. There's been a bunch of unforeseen things that have happened. So how would he handle that? If he wants to play and he would never play, how would he handle that? I think that's something worth exploring as well.
Alrighty, that will do it for this rendition of Hey Chris, wrapping up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Want to get a shout out on the podcast like our guys earlier today? Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.